Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hotel News Now podcast. I'm news editor Sean McCracken. Through the course of this week, the hotel industry has seen a wave of merger and acquisition activity involving hotel management companies, including PM Hotel Group's strategic merger with Sightline Hospitality, Pyramid Global Hospitality's European Vision Hamilton Pyramid Europe merging with Axiom Hospitality, KSL Capital selling Davidson Hotel Group to Nautic Partners, and a strategic partnership between Peachtree Group and Group 10 Management. To get at all the reasons why deals like this happen and how they come together, Hotel News Now reached out to a pair of former hotel management executives involved in similar deals in the past. What follows is the first of those interviews with former Chesapeake Hospitality and Remington Hospitality executive Chris Green. Stay tuned for his insights into the recent wave of deals, and come back early next week for our second episode on the topic with Prism Hotels and Resorts founder Steve Van. Hi, everybody. This is Sean McCracken, news editor of Hotel News Now, here with Chris Green, who I think has a kind of useful perspective on the news we've had this week. Chris spent about 2 decades with Chesapeake Hospitality, rising to the position of CEO before that company was bought by Remington Hospitality back in 2022. Chris also worked about 2 years with Remington before becoming a bit of a free agent or a retiree, I guess, last year. And Chris, I guess what the reason I wanted to reach out and talk to you this week is obviously we've had this kind of rash of hotel operator M&A, and it really feels like these deals come in waves, and this we clearly have another wave this week. What do you make of it? What do you make of, all the moving and shaking in the hotel management space?
Well, it's good to be with you, Sean. There's really only a couple reasons that these deals happen. And what's kind of occurred really since we came through the pandemic was hotel owners are in a little bit of a frozen state due to the dislocation of asset values and the potential to get out of them or make a move. And they've also kind of been frozen with operators. What I mean by that is there's not enough meat on the bone to switch operators one or two at a time and find the additional performance necessarily that you want to get some value out of the hotel. So what's that also creates is a demand for the third party operators when they're trying to grow their platforms, which is how we are all built, is to grow. They don't have access to these 1Z, 2Z, 3Z, 4Z deals that we used to happen in waves. So what
Yeah.
they're having to do is go out and find platforms. And that's what I think you see happening, right? So we had the PM deal this week, right? Joseph Bojanowski is a good friend of mine. They're growing through strategic M&A. And if you look at that deal specifically, which I'm sure we'll talk about, there's a reason he did that, not just for the association with the new asset pool, but kind of a strategic thought on his business. So these things are, access to more deals more quickly. Also talent. You can't forget the talent. One of the things that in our merger deal that we brought to the table for the Remington merger was we had great talent, and it's hard to find
Mhm.
30 really great hoteliers all at once. So you've got
Yeah.
that reason, the growth and development, and then frankly, scale allows you to do certain things that you can't do as a mid-sized operator. So, and I was both, so I'm very familiar with what it looks like to be a mid-sized operator, what you can and can't do, and then what scale gives you.
I mean, it really seems like that was the rallying cry coming out of the pandemic, and especially after the Interstate Aimbridge deal. Oh, I can't even remember what year that happened now at this point, but it seemed like it was all scale, 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 and you got to hit a certain point to make things a bit more affordable. But it seems like more and more there's, like you were saying, there's more layers to the why behind why these deals happen.
There really are. And honestly, at a certain point, if you take the top 10 operators, Aimbridge might argue that their massive scale being almost twice the bigger than anybody else gives them more capacity to leverage purchasing or those type of things. I would tell you that I disagree. I think if you're in the top 15 or so operators, you're accessing the same opportunities. So to me, that playing field has gotten leveled. It's really more about the ability to do certain things like proprietary BI platforms or
Hmm.
proprietary digital marketing platforms, things that you can do when you have the additional scale that you just can't do as a 30 to 50 hotel operator.
Yeah, so you had already mentioned earlier this week it was announced that PM Hotel Group announced a strategic merger with Sightline Hospitality. Of the rash of deals we've seen this week, this is probably the most akin to what you went through at Chesapeake. Um, so just for like listener context, like what's it like going through a deal like that, especially as I mean, it's fair to say that Chesapeake was the smaller of those two companies. So what's it like kind of answering to a new higher level of the corporate hierarchy and then kind of wanting to merge everything into one operation?
Well, for us, it was about several things, right? We wanted access for our client base. We'd been a well-known, well-respected operator, but as we continued to try and access the market, we would always end up at the development table, and the deals would get go. Even though we thought we were the best operator, it would be they'd go to Aimbridge or they'd go to Remington or they'd go to Crescent because they were there first and they had
Yeah.
a lot of pretty toys to offer. So our belief was, after long discussions with Sloan Dean, the CEO at Remington, that he and I had alignment on. This is exactly what we can offer that will be different, that can make an impact on the marketplace. And if you'll remember, Remington didn't have a ton of third party. I think they had 11 or 12 hotels other than the affiliated Ashford portfolio. So for
Yeah.
them, it launched them into being a real force in third party operations. And so all of those were of value, and bringing together the two cultures were of value. So that part was great. Learning to exist in a bigger platform is also a challenge, frankly,
Yeah.
because you just can't be as nimble. And that's not a knock on the big boys. I mean, I work there. It's you just can't be as nimble and you can't be as curated. We believed we had a very curated approach to management. At a certain point, when you've got 137 hotels in 37 states, you've really got to standardize some things, or else you're
Hmm.
going to lose track, right? To do a good job. So there's a yin and a yang to this whole process, Sean, that is not readily apparent, but that you can feel it as a hotel owner or a client of the management groups. You gain commercial capacity, you gain access to more development capacity. There's things that you gain. I think that you net lost some of the personalized handholding.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it seems like you brought up the idea of culture too. And you hear that brought up so often with these deals, how important kind of an alignment of culture is. But I wonder from somebody who went through this process, what's it like trying to maintain, you spent 2 decades developing a culture at Chesapeake, and regardless of how similar, dissimilar it might be for the other company, there's a bit of a transition there, I'm sure. So what's it like kind of just wanting to put in that, how do you go about putting on your imprint of like, this is how we see culture and this is how we'll maintain that going forward?
Well, I mean, it really has to start at the negotiation table, and I mean, listen, anything can happen, right? But we had very deep discussions about what I believed it meant to be a good cultured organization, and Sloan and I were very much aligned. And there has to be a willingness from the acquirer, the bigger company,
Hmm.
to let me back up. A lot of times, the bigger company, because they're bigger, thinks they know best. And I do want to credit Sloan and the team at Remington. They were open to, we're willing to do whatever's best. If
Yeah.
Chesapeake had a better system, let's do that. And if Remington had a better system, let's do that. But not just take, I think the risk is when you're a massive operator and you say, oh, we're going to pick up this management company B and we're just going to jam our policies and procedures down on top of it.
Yeah.
I think you have to ask yourself, why are we buying the company in the first place? Like, what value do we see in it? Is it just the contracts, or do they actually do some things that are really good that we can incorporate to grow our business?
Yeah. And it's always interesting when you think about that, the question of why are you buying the company? Because I feel like a lot of people would take kind of the Blackstone approach of if you buy something, you kind of want to bring some sort of value add. But a lot of these companies, for in whatever realm they exist, are already established companies, right? I mean, you look at just this week we had it's not the type of deal that we're talking about so far, but earlier this week it was announced KSL sold Davidson, which was, I mean, long one of the most established players in hotel operations, to a new private equity group, Nautic Partners. So that's like a new owner that I'm sure they have ideas on how this company should run, right? So like there's a
Correct.
process there.
Correct. But if you look at that deal, I mean, when you're buying hotels, and you know this, right? There's deals that would be for like consortias or high net worth clients, hotels for sale, and then there's institutional assets, right? So a Hilton, Blue Flag Hilton downtown Chicago or downtown New York, those are institutional deals. You're going to pay a premium for that hotel, but you're going to have a certain return on that guaranteed just because of the demand and the market. Well, that's what the Davidson deal is. Davidson is a
Yeah.
very high quality operator. I have a ton of respect for Tom and the team over there. They have high quality assets. They consistently perform. I never liked going up against them in pitches because they
Yeah.
are good. They're very good, right? So they're very
Tom is
good.
also a very charming guy. So yeah.
He is. Well, he is. So that doesn't help, but that's what that is. But if you pull back a little bit, Sean, from that, you can't. There's only so much you can get from a deal, right? So it depends. I don't know the details of the deal and what they paid. KSL was the seller, so I'm sure that Nautic paid a fair to above fair price for the company. And so they've got to figure out a way to get a return. That's either through
Yeah.
growing the platform or restructuring, which
Yeah.
which let's just pretend it's not the Davidson deal.
Hmm.
But remember when I said, why did you buy a company in the first place? Well, if you bought a company, let's use Chesapeake, and you knew Chesapeake was a culture company that offered curated service and that was well known for its culture, and you bought it and you said, okay, here's what we're going to do is we're going to strip it of all its people, we're going to cut costs and run it on a shoestring because we bought it. That's no longer Chesapeake. You
Yeah.
didn't. Does that make sense?
No,
So
for
you've
sure.
got to be you got to be very careful when you're crafting the deal that your thesis aligns with what you bought.
For sure. For sure. I mean, at that point too, you question why even buy a platform and why not just start it if you don't like what's already there, you know?
Right, right. Just because you can't access deals is part of the
Yeah.
problem, but yeah.
Well, yeah. But you just hire somebody who's out there like a Chris Green, right? And just start a new
Yeah.
hotel operating company. Not that you're out, not that you're doing that, but
Nope. No.
theoretically. So yeah, just to touch on the kind of the idea of another couple of deals that happened this week. Pyramid Hospitality, their European division is merging with Axiom Hospitality, which they say is going to create one of the bigger third-party operators in Europe. And the other thing that just came through right before we talking about this is Peachtree Group announced a partnership with Group 10 Management to kind of grow their third-party platform. And the thing I wanted to ask you is, it seems like a lot of these deals have kind of different structures to them. I mean, there's traditional acquisitions, there's truer mergers, and then we've kind of seen this rise of like the partnerships, which are like almost like a pseudo merger. We saw the same thing a few years ago from Hotel Group and Hotel Equities.
Hotel equities. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering what how you kind of see the pros and cons of the different structures here.
I mean, I like the strategic partnerships. I mean, basically, what you're doing in that is you're warehousing all of the back office, right? You're
Yeah,
taking all of the expense of back office, whether it's accounting, and that's where you're driving all your efficiencies. But you're keeping that niche leadership team. So Group 10's a regional operator. I think they've got 13 or 14 assets. I don't know if they're going to keep the leadership like the president over there or not. But then you've got access and development access to different markets than you would have just as Peachtree. And I think there's some really smart parts to that. You've seen hotel equities do very well with it. So when you do a partnership, then you can have that leadership team out in the West, like the hotel group out in the West, they can go and do their own development and grow their
yeah,
platform. And yet they can tap into the mothership for the scale. So it creates these smaller growing corporations within the big framework of a monster operator, where I think there offers some flexibility that when you do a true merger and you make everything the same, you can't offer. So
yeah.
there's reasons for both, right? There's reasons for both, but I know those guys over at Hotel Equities. They've done, Joe Reardon and Brad and all those guys. They've done a great job doing these strategic alignments.
And I mean, we were talking about culture earlier. That seems like if you're keeping the kind of the lines, the fences up to some degree, it seems like one way to kind of protect the individual cultures of each of those companies.
The only risk I could see would be having too much siloing or too
Yeah.
separate of, okay, one company can't run completely differently than the other company
Yeah. Yeah.
because you would have real issues.
Mhm.
Or let's say you had the hotel group and all of their owners wanted individual P&Ls done differently, every single one of them differently. Well,
Mhm.
if you're shipping everything to the mothership in Atlanta for Hotel Equities and they're producing P&Ls one way, it's not very efficient to stop and then produce 13 different P&Ls for the hotel group, right?
Yeah.
So there's got to be some agreement on, we're going to use this and the benefits program and the training and recruitment. But think about that too, Sean. That's the thing everybody does. The one thing I loved about taking the Chesapeake, I think we took 38 people out of the 46 we had employed at the time of the merger. Some of them retired over to Remington. Was, I mean, access to career growth. I mean, the bigger
Mhm.
platforms offer people tremendous amount of upward mobility, where in a mid-sized operator, there's one president and then there's one VP, and
Yeah.
unless somebody dies, it's not changing. So
You bring up, you mentioned kind of the communication with ownership there. And that's, I think, an interesting question because, I mean, you go through what you guys went through. You had owners who you inked deals with because they wanted to work with Chesapeake. And all of a sudden they're working with Remington. And as much as you look to maintain that relationship, it's fundamentally a different thing at the end of the day. So how do you communicate to those owners the benefits of this? And I mean, what's that process like?
well, we started as early as we could, right? You certainly don't want these things getting out on the street. So once we felt like we were close to having something that made sense for both of us, we talked to our owners in advance. I mean, I had
Mhm.
relationships going back 15 years with owners. We had a very stable portfolio of hotels, and we just
Mhm.
basically did a benefits analysis and said, yes, these are the things that may change, but here's all the new you're going to get. And
Yeah.
I can tell you that on balance, all the new that they got was worth it. A lot
Mhm.
of commercial success, a lot of outperformance on RGI in their marketplaces because we had access to new tools and new resources that we had never had at Chesapeake. Um, Maybe less touch points, but the ultimately, right? I've always said owners love relationships and everything else, but what they really love is a healthy bottom line. And so we
Yeah.
were able to, if you're able to deliver that, it makes every other conversation a lot easier.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the lead, right? I will make you more money smooths over a lot of that.
Right. So
So, I mean, I guess as we started this conversation, these things are coming in waves and, we see different deal structures and all that. But I'm wondering from your perspective, from somebody who's been in the industry a while, what do you think is coming next? Is it more consolidation? Is it different deal structures? What's your general expectation for how kind of the hotel operator segment is going to evolve?
I feel like there's going and there has been a growing division. You have some startups out there that are doing very well and have committed to kind of staying mid-size. Charles Oswald's company, Aperture Hotels.
Hmm.
There's a few others, Stay Pineapple Hotels. A couple people that are in that 25, 35 range. I think there
Yeah.
is an appetite among
Hmm.
some owners to be with a small to mid-sized firm where they know the
Yeah.
CEO and they can call the CEO. So I don't think you're ever going to see that go away. But I do think, and this is something we haven't touched on yet, the rise of the management companies has really been. I mean, they've been around, but they've really been, late '80s and then '90s, 2000s, right? So you've got people aging out, frankly, owners
Yeah.
of management companies, if that makes sense. They're ready to
Yeah, for sure.
retire. And honestly, in a management company, other than passing it on or finding somebody to run it and then taking a kind of a check as a dividend, the one way to get your equity out of the business is to sell it. And
For sure.
that was a little bit of what was going on at Chesapeake too, to kind of give you a peek under the hood. We had several of the partners that were at or near retirement, and we were
Hmm.
looking at rebuilding after COVID and what we're going to do. And there was an opportunity to get some equity out for the ownership and take our people to a new place that had an alignment with culture. So it was a win-win. So I think there's other decisions at play that they're not readily apparent. It's not just the deal. It
Yeah.
could be, personal reasons people are ready to make a move.
I find that personally really interesting because when we look at like business trends like this, I think the age cohorts and people kind of retiring out of the business is something that isn't really talked about a lot. But it reminds me of when I was a very young reporter at a tiny little newspaper in central New York. The publisher before he came to the newspaper I was at, his job was basically doing due diligence on buying up newspapers for a chain that he worked for, and he said that that's what they did. They looked for basically family-owned newspapers where they were at a certain point, like the family was kind of aging out of wanting to do it anymore, and it seems like that kind of human element to it obviously makes a lot of sense.
Well, if you look back, Sean, I mean, look at some of the ones that happened over the past couple of years, like Ergo.
Hmm.
Um, those Kevin and those guys over at Ergo, they were just at that point, right? They
Yeah.
were ready and I was younger. That's why I'm the one that stayed and went over to Remington. But most of my partners were like, okay, this is good. We're ready to kind of call it and do
Hmm.
some other things. So, and I know that several of these others were that way. They're just like, this is a lot. Running a management company is tough. And if you're a
Yeah.
mid-sized manager and you're trying to grow and you're going in to pitch a deal for a DoubleTree in Columbus, Ohio, and it's you and I have 20 hotels, and then you're pitching against Crescent, Ambridge, Remington, and whoever. It's just a tough pitch. You better have some charm and you better
Hmm.
have some performance you can stand on or a relationship, or otherwise it's really hard to fight.
Yeah.
And that was my frustration is we would go to pitches and I knew we were the best choice. In
Hmm.
my heart I believed it. And we'd still lose because I didn't have 30 people in digital marketing that could
Yeah.
whip up a website tomorrow. So,
Hmm. You know
so
that what you're bringing up, the difficulty of the business is obviously real. I mean, you guys are between, as I say, you guys as in hotel operators are between all of the different stakeholder groups, the brands, the owners, the guests. You answer to everyone in that process. If anything goes wrong, it's on you. You constantly need to deliver results regardless of, the universe of things going on for hotels and travel and all of that. And yeah, and the funny thing about that is, just a few years ago too, we saw Newcrest Image get out of hotel operations for that exact reason. Mahul Patel specifically said, I don't want to run hotels anymore. It's too difficult. Like I can just own them. Like,
yeah, it's very difficult, and nothing has gotten easier. Frankly, everything's gotten more difficult. I mean, the
yeah.
costs, and well, we didn't even get to talk about this, but costs aren't just rising at the hotels. Remember, I mean, there's a war for talent, and I've been talking about this for years. Unfortunately, after 9/11, and then after the financial crisis, when we pared down staffing, we went down a third in staffing after 9/11, and another half of that after the financial crisis, where a hotel that used to have 200 associates has 100 now. Okay, that's basically
Hmm.
the math. Well, what that has done is created a shortage in the funnel
Yeah.
of executive talent to run management companies, right?
Hmm.
So we're like, okay, where are these people at? Well, we got rid of them in '08 and '09. They went in other industries. And so there's this whole, it's the same thing with GMs now. That's why you see a lot of very, early 30s GMs because the 40s and 50s they're not there.
Yeah.
They left they were assistant general managers in 2007, and that was one of the levels we got rid of. And all
Hmm.
of a sudden, here we got a talent drain, and we have to look back and see what we did to ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the same thing for the management companies. Management companies are looking for VPs of operation. I can tell you when you go out and look for a VP of operations nowadays, you'll get applicants, but it's a thin pool
Mm-hmm.
of great VPs of operations. And here's the thing. Generally, the VP of operations or the regional director of operations is the one who meets with the owner. And so that person becomes Remington to that
Yeah.
owner.
Mm-hmm.
And if they just left management company Y or X the prior week, it's really hard to become Remington in 1 week or 3 weeks or 5 weeks, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to it that people just don't think about.
Yeah, which circles back to, one of the first things you said, which is people are basically buying talent.
Right.
So, Chris, I think this has been a wonderful conversation, hopefully illuminating for our listeners on kind of the whys and hows behind these deals. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Isaac Colazo, Vice President of Analytics at STR.
Hi, and I'm Jan Freitag, National Director for Hospitality Analytics for the CoStar Group. Tune in to our new show, Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast.
It's a podcast on the global hotel industry, its current trends, what we're thinking about, and where the industry's going.
And we like to have fun with the data too. Find us on hotelnewsnow.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Hotel News Now podcast, which was recorded on November 6th, 2024, and edited by me, Sean McCracken. Visit hotelnewsnow.com every day for the latest hospitality news.